The trading post on Nexus Station buzzed with the usual mix of alien merchants, smugglers, and information brokers. In the dim corner of Krovik's bar, 3 Xanthari pirates hunched over their drinks, their scaled hands wrapped around crystalline glasses filled with fermented algae wine. The largest of them, Captain Vextar, kept glancing nervously at his chronometer. "She should have been here by now," he hissed, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the recycled air. "The human said she would come." His companion, a smaller Xanthari with scarred hide, leaned closer. "Maybe she knows it's a trap. Humans are cunning creatures, Captain. This one especially." Vextar's laugh was a harsh rasp. "One human female against the entire Crimson Talon crew? We faced down Imperial cruisers and lived to tell the tale. What can one small human do?" The third pirate, younger than the others, shifted uncomfortably. "Captain, perhaps we should reconsider. The stories about her, stories." Vextar slammed his glass down, the sound echoing through the bar. Several patrons turned to look, then quickly averted their eyes when they saw the pirates' weapons. Myths and legends spread by cowards. No single being has ever taken down an entire pirate fleet. It's impossible. But even as he spoke, Vextar remembered the reports that had been filtering through the criminal underworld for the past 2 years. Ships found drifting in space, their crews unconscious and their cargo holds emptied. Security footage that showed impossible things. A lone figure moving through corridors like smoke, disabling entire squads of armed mercenaries without firing a single shot. The younger pirate lowered his voice. "They say she moves like a ghost, Captain. That she can be in 3 places at once. That she once took down a hegemony dreadnought with nothing but a maintenance pod and some spare parts." "Enough." Vextar's scales darkened with anger. "She's just another human bounty hunter trying to make a name for herself. When she arrives, we'll show her what happens to those who interfere with Xanthari business." Across the galaxy, on a small transport ship disguised as a merchant vessel, Elena Vasquez checked her equipment one final time. The cramped cargo hold had been converted into a mobile command center, filled with screens, communication arrays, and weapons that most governments would classify as experimental. She wore simple black clothing that seemed to absorb light, and her movements were precise and economical. Elena had been tracking the Crimson Talon crew for 3 months. They had been raiding civilian transports along the Outer Rim, targeting refugee ships fleeing the latest war between the Galactic Council and the hegemony. The pirates seemed to enjoy terrorizing families who had already lost everything, selling their victims into slavery or worse. The Xanthari thought they were clever, setting up this meeting as an ambush. They had used intermediaries to contact her, claiming they had information about a missing council diplomat. Elena knew it was a trap, of course, but she had come anyway, because the Crimson Talon crew had made one critical mistake. They had killed children. She touched the small device attached to her wrist, a piece of technology that officially didn't exist. The Council's Special Operations Division had spent 5 years developing it, combining human ingenuity with alien technology salvaged from a dozen different species. It allowed her to interface directly with electronic systems, hack into networks with her thoughts, and coordinate multiple operations simultaneously. Elena had been the first volunteer for the experimental program. The modifications to her nervous system had been painful and dangerous, with a 60% chance of death or permanent brain damage. But she had survived, and the results had exceeded everyone's expectations. She could process information faster than any organic brain should be able to, react to threats before they fully materialized, and coordinate complex operations across multiple star systems. The irony was that the Council had created her to fight the hegemony's super soldiers, elite troops enhanced with cybernetic implants and combat drugs. But when the war had bogged down into a stalemate, Elena had found herself reassigned to deal with problems the regular military couldn't handle: pirates, slavers, and war criminals who thought they could hide in the lawless regions of space. She had never intended to become a legend. Each mission was simply a job that needed to be done, a wrong that needed to be righted. But word had spread through the underworld about the human who could appear anywhere, who seemed to know things she couldn't possibly know, and who left her enemies alive but broken, their operations dismantled and their resources redistributed to their victims. The criminals had given her a code name, whispered in bars and hidden bases across the galaxy. They called her Ghost Protocol, a reference to her ability to appear and disappear without trace. to turn entire organizations against themselves, and to always stay one step ahead of those who hunted her. Elena's ship dropped out of hyperspace near Nexus Station. She could see the massive structure spinning slowly against the backdrop of stars, its docking bays filled with ships from a dozen species. The station existed in neutral space, theoretically protected by treaties and diplomatic immunity. In reality, it was a haven for smugglers, pirates, and anyone else who preferred to operate outside the law. She had spent the journey studying the Crimson Talon crew's psychological profiles, their combat patterns, and their personal histories. Vextar was brutal but predictable, driven by greed and a need to prove himself superior to other species. His crew followed him out of fear rather than loyalty, which meant they would abandon him the moment they sensed weakness. Elena smiled as she began her approach to the station. The pirates thought they were setting a trap for her, but they had merely provided her with the perfect opportunity to end their reign of terror once and for all. By the time this night was over, the name Ghost Protocol would have new meaning in the criminal underworld, and somewhere in the dark between the stars, 3 more refugee ships would sleep safely, their children dreaming of better worlds ahead. Elena's ship docked at Nexus Station with barely a whisper. The modified engines ran so quietly that the station's sensors registered it as just another merchant vessel, making a routine supply run. She had arrived 12 hours early, giving herself time to prepare the battlefield. The first thing she did was tap into the station's communication network. Her wrist device interfaced with the nearest data port, and within seconds she had access to every camera, every internal sensor, and every security system on Nexus Station. The station's AI tried to detect the intrusion, but Elena's technology operated on principles that most alien computers couldn't even recognize. Through the cameras, she watched the Crimson Talon crew preparing their ambush. They had rented out the entire lower level of Krovik's bar, positioning their soldiers at strategic points throughout the establishment. Elena counted 23 Xanthari pirates, armed with plasma rifles and wearing combat armor that could stop most small arms fire. What they didn't know was that Elena had been studying Xanthari physiology for months. Their scales provided excellent protection against energy weapons, but they had a weakness that most species didn't know about. The neural clusters that controlled their motor functions were located just behind their neck ridges, protected by only a thin layer of softer tissue. A precisely placed electromagnetic pulse could disable a Xanthari warrior without permanent harm. Elena spent the next 6 hours moving through the station's maintenance corridors, places that most inhabitants didn't even know existed. She planted small devices at key locations, power junctions, communication relays, and ventilation systems. Each device was no larger than a coin, and they would be virtually impossible to detect once activated. She also took the time to study the station's civilian population. There were families here, traders trying to make an honest living and refugees seeking passage to safer worlds. Elena made note of their locations, planning her operation to ensure that no innocent people would be caught in the crossfire. As the designated meeting time approached, Elena changed her appearance. The black clothing was replaced with the simple brown robes of a religious pilgrim, and she used a genetic modifier to temporarily alter her facial features. When she walked into Krovik's bar, she looked like just another traveler seeking a quiet drink. Captain Vextar was sitting at a table near the back wall, his soldiers trying to look casual as they nursed their drinks. Elena could see the tension in their body language, the way their hands hovered near their weapons. They were predators waiting to strike, confident in their superiority. Elena ordered a simple drink from the bartender, a nervous Triaxian who kept glancing toward the pirates. She could smell the fear in the air, the way other patrons hurried to finish their business and leave. The entire bar felt like a trap waiting to spring. "You're early," Vextar called out when Elena approached his table. His voice carried the arrogance of someone who believed himself to be in control. "I'm efficient," Elena replied, settling into the chair across from him. Up close, she could see the scars on his scales, evidence of numerous battles. This was a warrior who had survived through violence and cunning. "You said you had information about Diplomat Kranesh." Vextar's laugh was harsh. "Oh, we have information. The good diplomat is enjoying our hospitality aboard my ship. Whether he continues to enjoy it depends entirely on your cooperation." Elena's expression didn't change, but inside, she felt the familiar cold anger that preceded her most decisive actions. The pirates had confirmed what she suspected. They were holding a council diplomat hostage. This had just become a rescue mission as well as a takedown operation. "What do you want?" she asked. "Your surrender," Vextar said simply. "The Great Ghost Protocol delivered to our clients in the hegemony. They're offering quite a substantial bounty for you, dead or alive. Preferably alive." Elena nodded as if considering the offer. "And if I refuse?" "Then the diplomat dies, along with anyone else on this station who might have seen too much." Vextar's scales darkened with amusement. "We've planted charges throughout the civilian sectors. One command from me and this entire level becomes debris." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's recycled air. These pirates weren't just criminals. They were terrorists willing to murder hundreds of innocent people to achieve their goals. The anger inside her crystallized into something harder and more dangerous. "You seem confident," she said quietly. "We have you outnumbered 20-1, Vextar replied. "You have no weapons, no backup, and nowhere to run. Even the famous Ghost Protocol can't fight her way out of this situation." Elena smiled, and something in that expression made the younger pirate at the next table shift uncomfortably. "You're absolutely right. I can't fight my way out of this situation." Vextar frowned, confused by her calm acceptance. "Then you surrender?" "No," Elena said, touching her wrist device. "I don't need to fight my way out because I was never trapped in the first place." The lights in the bar flickered and died, plunging the establishment into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, casting everything in an eerie red glow. In that moment of confusion, Elena moved. The device on her wrist projected a holographic display that only she could see, showing her the location of every person in the bar. The electromagnetic pulse generators she had planted throughout the station activated simultaneously, sending precisely calibrated energy bursts toward the Xanthari pirates. The effect was immediate and devastating. 23 Xanthari warriors collapsed where they stood, their nervous systems temporarily disrupted. They were alive but completely paralyzed, unable to move or speak. Elena was already moving through the chaos, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to navigate the darkened bar with perfect precision. She reached Vextar's table just as the pirate captain was struggling to understand what had happened to his crew. "Impossible," he gasped, his voice slurred as the electromagnetic pulse began to affect his higher brain functions. "You're just one human." Elena leaned close to his ear. "That's where you made your mistake," she whispered. "You assumed that being human was a limitation." She pressed a small device against Vextar's neck and he slumped forward, unconscious but unharmed. Around the bar, the other pirates were experiencing the same fate as the electromagnetic pulses overwhelmed their nervous systems. The entire operation had taken less than 30 seconds. Elena stood in the center of the bar, surrounded by unconscious pirates, and began her next phase of the plan. She needed to locate their ship, rescue the diplomat, and ensure that the Crimson Talon crew would never threaten innocent people again. As she worked, Elena didn't notice the small crowd of civilians who had gathered at the bar's entrance, watching in awe as a single human woman had effortlessly defeated an entire pirate crew. Word was already spreading through the station's communication networks, carried by voices filled with wonder and disbelief. They had witnessed the birth of a legend, though none of them yet understood the full significance of what they had seen. Elena moved through the station's corridors like a shadow, the unconscious pirates' access codes already extracted from their personal devices. The Crimson Talon ship was docked in Bay 94, a remote section of the station where few legitimate traders bothered to venture. As she approached the docking bay, Elena's enhanced senses detected the subtle electromagnetic signatures of the ship's security systems. The pirate vessel was a modified hegemony cruiser, its hull scarred from numerous battles and bristling with illegal weapons. Elena counted 6 heat signatures aboard. The skeleton crew left to guard the ship and their prisoner. Through the ship's external cameras, which she had already hacked, she could see 2 guards stationed at the airlock. Elena smiled grimly. The pirates had made their second critical mistake. They had left their ship connected to the station's power grid and communication network. Through these connections, Elena could access every system aboard the vessel, without even setting foot on the ship. She found Diplomat Kranesh in the cargo hold, suspended in an energy cage that would deliver painful shocks if he tried to escape. The elderly Valerian looked weak but alert, his large eyes scanning his prison for any possible weakness. Elena felt a surge of respect for the diplomat's resilience. Working from a maintenance alcove near the docking bay, Elena began her infiltration of the ship's systems. First, she disabled the internal sensors, creating blind spots in the security network. Then she accessed the environmental controls, flooding specific sections of the ship with a sleeping gas that was odorless and colorless. One by one, the guards succumbed to the gas, collapsing at their posts without ever realizing they were under attack. Helena waited until all 6 heat signatures showed the slow, steady breathing patterns of unconscious beings before she moved. The airlock opened at her approach, recognizing her as Captain Vextar, thanks to the access codes she had stolen. Helena moved through the ship's corridors with practiced efficiency, her path taking her directly to the cargo hold where the diplomat was held. "Who are you?" Kranesh asked as Helena approached his cage. Despite his imprisonment, his voice remained strong and dignified. "Someone who doesn't like pirates," Helena replied, interfacing with the cage's control systems. The energy field flickered and died, allowing the diplomat to step free. "You're her," Kranesh said, his eyes widening with recognition. "The one they call Ghost Protocol. The Council has been looking for you." Helena paused in her work of securing the ship's weapons systems. "Looking for me?" "To offer you a commission," Kranesh explained, rubbing his wrists where the energy shackles had chafed. "Admiral Zareth believes that someone with your capabilities could help end this war with the hegemony. The Council is prepared to offer you your own command." Helena continued working, but her mind was racing. A commission would mean official recognition, resources, and the ability to operate on a larger scale. But it would also mean answering to politicians and following orders that might conflict with her moral compass. "We can discuss that later," she said finally. "Right now I need you to do exactly what I tell you if you want to get out of this alive." Together, they moved through the ship, Helena guiding them through the section she had cleared while she remotely operated the vessel's systems. She had discovered something disturbing in the ship's databanks. The Crimson Talon crew wasn't just random pirates. They were being funded and directed by someone within the hegemony's intelligence service. This was part of a larger operation designed to destabilize the Outer Rim, making it easier for the hegemony to move their forces through neutral space. The refugee ships they had been attacking weren't random targets. They were carrying families from worlds that had strategic value to both sides in the war. Helena downloaded the entire contents of the ship's computer core, including encrypted communications with their hegemony handlers. This information would be invaluable to the Council's intelligence services, proof of the hegemony's involvement in piracy and terrorism. As they reached the ship's exit, Helena heard the sound of approaching footsteps. Station security had finally arrived, alerted by the chaos in Krovik's bar. Helena could see them through the ship's external cameras, a squad of heavily armed Nexus security officers, led by a grizzled Kavarian who looked like he had seen too much violence in his career. "Commander Thek," Diplomat Kranesh said with obvious relief as the security team entered the docking bay. "Thank the void you're here." Commander Thek's 4 eyes focused on Helena with obvious suspicion. "And this is?" "My rescuer," Kranesh replied firmly. "Without her intervention, I would likely be dead by now." Helena could see the calculation in Thek's expression. The Kavarian had heard the reports from the bar, had seen the unconscious pirates scattered throughout the establishment. He was trying to decide whether Helena was a threat to station security or an asset. "The charges," Helena said quietly. "Vexitar claimed they had planted explosives throughout the civilian sectors." Thek's expression darkened. "We found 3 devices before your intervention. My teams are still searching." "There are 4 more," Helena said, consulting the data she had extracted from the pirate ship. "I can give you their exact locations." She transmitted the coordinates to Thek's handheld device, watching as his expression shifted from suspicion to grudging respect. The Kavarian understood what she had just given him, the information needed to save hundreds of innocent lives. "Who are you, really?" Thek asked. Helena looked around the docking bay at the unconscious pirates, the rescued diplomat, and the evidence of hegemony involvement in terrorism. Word of what had happened here would spread throughout the criminal underworld within hours. The story would grow with each telling. A lone human who had defeated an entire pirate crew, rescued a diplomat, and uncovered a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of the hegemony government. I'm someone who believes that children should be able to sleep safely on refugee ships, Elena said simply. She turned to leave, but diplomat Krenesh called after her. The commission offer is real. The council needs people like you. Elena paused at the docking bay entrance. The council already has people like me. They just don't know how to use them properly. As she walked away, Elena could hear Commander Thek speaking into his communicator, reporting the incident to his superiors. Within minutes, the story would reach the civilian news networks. Within hours, it would be transmitted across the galaxy. The legend of Ghost Protocol was growing, and with it, the fear of every criminal who preyed on the innocent. They would start to understand that there was someone out there watching. Someone who could appear anywhere and strike without warning. Someone who had just proven that being human wasn't a limitation. It was an advantage they couldn't comprehend. Behind her, diplomat Krenesh was already composing his report to the council, recommending that they find a way to bring Elena Vasquez into the official fold. He had seen something in her eyes that gave him hope, a determination that could change the course of the war itself. But Elena was already thinking about her next mission, her next opportunity to prove that humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology or its weapons. It was its refusal to accept that evil could triumph over justice. 3 weeks after the Nexus Station incident, Elena received a transmission that made her blood run cold. The message came through encrypted channels, bounced through 17 relay stations to avoid detection. When she finally decoded it, she found herself looking at the terrified face of Captain Yara Chen, commander of the refugee transport safe harbor. Ghost Protocol. If you're receiving this, we need immediate help, Chen whispered, her voice barely audible above the sound of alarms. We're carrying 800 civilians, mostly families from the Kepler colonies. The hegemony found us. They're demanding we surrender for processing, but we know what that means. We have maybe 6 hours before they reach us. The transmission cut to static, but Elena had already traced its origin point. The safe harbor was drifting in the void sector, a region of space where broken hyperspace beacons created navigation hazards that most ships avoided. It was the perfect place for an ambush. Elena's enhanced neural interface processed the tactical situation in milliseconds. The hegemony had deployed Task Force Crimson, 3 heavy cruisers commanded by Admiral Korax, one of their most ruthless officers. Korax had earned his reputation by showing no mercy to civilian targets, claiming they were all potential military assets. The smart play would be to contact the council, request backup, and mount a coordinated rescue operation. But Elena knew that would take at least 12 hours to organize, and the refugees didn't have that long. By the time council forces arrived, 800 people would be dead or worse. Elena set course for the void sector, her ship's modified engines pushing her through hyperspace at speeds that would have torn apart most vessels. As she traveled, she began planning the most audacious operation of her career, a single-ship assault on 3 hegemony cruisers. The key was the void sector's unique properties. The broken hyperspace beacons created electromagnetic anomalies that interfered with most sensor systems. Elena's technology, however, had been designed to function in environments that would cripple conventional electronics. What was a disadvantage for the hegemony would be her greatest asset. Elena dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the void sector, immediately activating her ship's stealth systems. Through the chaotic interference, she could see the hegemony formation, 3 cruisers arranged in a triangle around the helpless transport. The safe harbor looked pathetically small compared to the warships surrounding it. Admiral Korax was broadcasting demands for surrender on all frequencies, his voice filled with sadistic pleasure. Attention transport vessel. You have 1 hour to prepare your passengers for transfer. Any resistance will result in the destruction of your ship. Elena studied the enemy formation through her sensors, noting the positioning of their weapons and shield generators. Each cruiser carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon, but they also had weaknesses that Elena's unique perspective allowed her to identify. She began her approach, using the electromagnetic interference to mask her ship's signature. Elena's first target was the cruiser Retribution, positioned on the transport's port side. The vessel's captain had made the mistake of aligning his ship's main sensor array with the strongest interference field, leaving him effectively blind. Elena's ship was equipped with weapons that existed nowhere else in the galaxy, prototypes, developed by combining human engineering with alien technology salvaged from a dozen different civilizations. Her primary weapon was a quantum disruptor that could phase through conventional shielding, targeting the molecular bonds that held enemy ships together. The attack began without warning. Elena's quantum disruptor struck the Retribution's engine core, causing a cascade failure that disabled the ship's propulsion and left it drifting helplessly. The crew had no idea what had hit them. Their sensors showed only empty space where the attack had originated. Admiral Corax's voice crackled over the communications channel, filled with rage and confusion. "All ships, we are under attack. Unknown hostile using advanced stealth technology." Elena was already moving to her second target, the cruiser Vengeance. The ship's captain was more cautious, keeping his vessel in constant motion and sweeping space with active sensors. But Elena had anticipated this response. She released a cloud of nanobots into space, microscopic machines that attached themselves to the cruiser's hull, and began interfacing with its electronic systems. Within minutes, Elena had access to the ship's internal networks, allowing her to see through the crew's own sensors. The nanobots also carried a special payload, a virus designed specifically to target hegemony computer systems. As the infection spread through the Vengeance's networks, critical systems began failing one by one. Life support fluctuated, weapons targeting went offline, and the ship's artificial intelligence began receiving contradictory commands. Engine room reports total system failure. Someone screamed over the hegemony communication channels. "We're losing everything. How is this possible?" Elena felt no satisfaction in the confusion and fear she was causing. These were enemy soldiers, but they were still sentient beings caught in the horror of war. Her mission wasn't to destroy them. It was to save the refugees. The third cruiser, Admiral Corax's flagship Dominator, was the most dangerous target. Corax had pulled his ship back from the refugee transport, creating a defensive position that would allow him to cover all approaches. Elena could see the Admiral's tactical mind at work. He was using the refugees as bait, hoping to draw the mysterious attacker into a trap. Elena smiled grimly. The Admiral was thinking like a conventional military officer, assuming his opponent would follow standard attack patterns. He had no way of understanding that he was facing someone who had redefined the very concept of warfare. Instead of attacking the flagship directly, Elena transmitted a message on an encrypted channel that only Corax would receive. Her voice, electronically disguised, filled the Admiral's command bridge. "Admiral Corax," she said, her tone calm and professional. "You have 30 seconds to order your ships to withdraw from this system." Corax's harsh laughter echoed through the channel. "You think you can threaten me, Phantom? I have 3 heavy cruisers and a crew of loyal soldiers." "What do you have?" "I have something you don't," Elena replied. "I have a conscience." She transmitted a data package to the Admiral's personal terminal, intelligence reports showing hegemony forces attacking civilian targets, evidence of war crimes committed under Corax's direct command, and most damning of all, records of children who had died in his operations. "You've seen my capabilities," Elena continued. "Your ships are disabled, your crews are terrified, and you're completely at my mercy. But I'm not here to destroy you. I'm here to save those refugees." Corax's voice was filled with venom. "And if I refuse?" Elena's response was to demonstrate the full extent of her abilities. Every screen on the Admiral's bridge suddenly displayed the same image. Elena's face looking directly at him through his own ship's cameras. She had complete control of his vessel's systems, and they both knew it. "Then I'll do what I have to do," she said quietly. "But I'd rather give you the chance to make the right choice." The communication channel fell silent. Through her access to the flagship's sensors, Elena could see the Admiral staring at her image, his expression cycling through rage, fear, and finally, reluctant respect. "Stand down," Corax ordered his crew. "All ships withdraw to minimum safe distance." Elena watched as the 3 cruisers pulled back from the refugee transport, their weapons powering down in acknowledgement of defeat. The safe harbor was free to continue its journey to safety. "Captain Chen," Elena transmitted to the refugee ship, "you're clear to depart. Stay in council space and you'll be safe." As the transport jumped to hyperspace carrying 800 lives to safety, Elena prepared to disappear back into the void. But Admiral Corax's voice stopped her. "Ghost Protocol," he said, using the name that was already becoming legend. "This isn't over." "No," Elena agreed. "It's not. But next time remember what happened here. Remember that someone is watching." Someone who won't let you hurt innocent people. She cut the transmission and engaged her stealth systems, vanishing from the hegemony sensors as if she had never existed. Behind her, 3 of the galaxy's most powerful warships drifted helplessly in space, their crews struggling to understand how one human had defeated them all. The story of the Void Sector incident spread like wildfire through both military and civilian channels. In Council space, Elena became a hero, proof that humanity could stand against the galaxy's greatest threats. In hegemony territory, whispered conversations spoke of the ghost who could appear anywhere, strike without warning, and disappear before anyone could respond. But for Elena, the most important outcome was simpler. 800 people were alive who might otherwise have died. That was worth more than any reputation or fear she might inspire. The hegemony's response to the Void Sector humiliation was swift and brutal. Within a month, they had deployed their most elite unit, the Shadow Hunters, 12 cybernetically enhanced super soldiers commanded by General Crix Voss. Each hunter was worth a squad of regular troops, their bodies modified with alien technology that made them faster, stronger, and deadlier than any organic being had a right to be. Elena learned of their deployment through intercepted communications, coded messages that spoke of eliminating the ghost and cleansing the outer systems. The hegemony had decided that if they couldn't capture Ghost Protocol, they would simply destroy everything she might try to protect. The Shadow Hunters' first target was the Harmony Medical Station, a neutral facility that treated wounded civilians from both sides of the war. Elena had worked with their doctors before, helping them evacuate patients from war zones. Now the hegemony was planning to destroy the station and everyone in it, claiming it was a Council military asset. Elena found herself facing an impossible situation. The medical station held 3,000 patients and staff, including children receiving treatment for injuries sustained in hegemony attacks. She couldn't evacuate them in time, and she couldn't fight 12 super soldiers in direct combat. Even her enhanced abilities had limits, but Elena had learned something important during her years of operating alone. The greatest weapon wasn't technology or enhanced reflexes. It was the ability to think differently, to see solutions that others missed. She began by studying the Shadow Hunters' psychological profiles, data she had stolen from hegemony intelligence networks months earlier. Each hunter was a former criminal or prisoner of war, their personalities wiped and rebuilt around concepts of loyalty and violence. They had no fear, no mercy, and no capacity for independent thought. That last trait would be their weakness. Elena's plan required her to be in 12 places at once, something that should have been impossible even for her, but she had spent the past 6 months developing new technology, inspired by the quantum principles that governed her disruptor weapons. If matter could exist in multiple states simultaneously, perhaps consciousness could as well. The quantum consciousness splitter was the most dangerous piece of technology Elena had ever created. It allowed her to divide her awareness across multiple locations, operating several bodies simultaneously while maintaining perfect coordination. The process was exhausting and potentially lethal, but it was the only way to save the medical station. Elena positioned herself in the asteroid field surrounding Harmony Station, her ship hidden among the rocky debris. As the Shadow Hunters' assault craft approached the station, Elena activated the consciousness splitter. Suddenly, she was seeing through 12 sets of eyes, feeling 12 different heartbeats, thinking 12 streams of simultaneous thought. The Shadow Hunters expected to face a single opponent, but Elena had become something unprecedented, a distributed intelligence that could coordinate attacks across multiple vectors while maintaining perfect tactical awareness. Each of her quantum-duplicated bodies carried different weapons and abilities, allowing her to adapt to whatever strategies the enemy employed. The first hunter to die never saw it coming. Elena 7 materialized behind him as he prepared to breach the station's medical bay, her molecular knife sliding between his cybernetic implants with surgical precision. The blade disrupted his enhanced nervous system, causing immediate cardiac arrest. Elena 3 and Elena 9 worked together to disable the station's life support systems, creating the illusion that the facility was already dying. The Shadow Hunters adjusted their tactics, moving to secure the reactor core instead of eliminating civilians. This gave Elena time to begin her evacuation protocol. Through the station's communication systems, Elena addressed the medical staff directly. "This is Ghost Protocol. Begin emergency evacuation procedures. You have 18 minutes before this facility is no longer safe." Dr. Sarah Okoye, the station's chief medical officer, recognized Elena's voice from previous encounters. "Elena, there are patients here who can't be moved. The children in the critical care ward will be safe," Elena interrupted. "Trust me." Elena, too, had already reached the critical care ward, her body phasing through the station's bulkheads using technology adapted from the quantum disruptor. She began installing portable life support systems on the most critical patients, preparing them for transport that shouldn't have been possible. Meanwhile, Elena 5 and Elena 11 were engaging the remaining shadow hunters in the station's main corridor. The cybernetic soldiers had never faced an opponent who could predict their moves before they made them, who seemed to know exactly where they would be and what they would do next. General Voss, monitoring the battle from his command ship, watched in growing disbelief as his elite soldiers were systematically dismantled by an enemy they couldn't even see clearly. The station's internal sensors showed multiple contacts moving with impossible speed and coordination, as if a single mind was controlling a dozen different bodies. "Impossible," Voss muttered, his cybernetic eyes zooming in on the sensor readings. No organic being can process that much information simultaneously. But Elena wasn't just an organic being anymore. She had become something new, something that challenged the very definitions of consciousness and identity. The quantum consciousness splitter allowed her to experience reality from multiple perspectives simultaneously, to think thoughts that existed in several states at once. Elena 4 reached the reactor core just as two shadow hunters prepared to overload it. Instead of fighting them directly, she transmitted a virus into their cybernetic implants, one that rewrote their targeting protocols. Suddenly, the two soldiers turned on each other, their programming convinced that each was an enemy infiltrator. In the medical bay, Elena 8 was coordinating with the evacuation shuttles, using her access to the station's traffic control systems to guide the civilian craft through the asteroid field. Each shuttle carried dozens of patients and medical staff, people who would have died if Elena hadn't been there to protect them. The most dangerous moment came when General Voss himself boarded the station, his personal augmentations far more advanced than those of his soldiers. Elena 1 faced him in the station's central hub, two enhanced beings meeting in combat that would determine the fate of thousands. Voss was faster and stronger than any human had a right to be, his reflexes boosted by quantum processors that could calculate trajectories and impact points faster than thought. But Elena had something he lacked, the ability to fight as 11 beings simultaneously, while he could only be in one place at a time. As Voss attacked Elena 1, Elena 6 flanked him from behind. When he adapted to fight two opponents, Elena 12 joined the battle from above. The general found himself facing an opponent who could coordinate perfect tactical maneuvers while maintaining individual combat effectiveness. "What are you?" Voss demanded as Elena's multiple forms pressed their attack. "I'm what humanity becomes when it refuses to accept limitations," Elena replied, her voice coming from several directions at once. The battle ended when Elena 7 managed to disable Voss's primary cybernetic implant, the device that controlled his enhanced reflexes. Without his technological advantages, the general was just another soldier, overwhelmed by an opponent who could be everywhere at once. As the last evacuation shuttle cleared the station, Elena began the final phase of her plan. The quantum consciousness splitter was taking a massive toll on her system, and she could feel her sense of self beginning to fracture under the strain. She had minutes at most before the technology either killed her or drove her permanently insane. Elena 1 through Elena 12 converged on the station's main computer core, their combined consciousness focusing on a single task, transmitting every piece of data about hegemony military operations to Council intelligence. Medical records, battle plans, troop movements, and most importantly, the locations of other planned attacks on civilian targets. The data burst lasted only seconds, but it contained enough intelligence to save millions of lives. As the transmission completed, Elena felt her distributed consciousness beginning to collapse back into a single point of awareness. The sensation was like being torn apart and reassembled at the quantum level. When Elena's awareness finally stabilized, she found herself alone in her ship, floating in the asteroid field as Harmony Medical Station exploded behind her. The Shadow Hunters were gone, their mission failed, their commander captured. 3,000 civilians were safely aboard evacuation shuttles, heading for Council space. But the cost had been enormous. Elena could feel the damage the consciousness splitter had inflicted on her neural pathways, the way her enhanced abilities had been pushed beyond their safe limits. She might never be able to use the technology again without risking permanent brain damage. General Voss, secured in the station's detention facility before the evacuation, would wake up to find himself a prisoner of the Council. The interrogation would yield more intelligence about hegemony operations, further weakening their ability to target civilians. Elena transmitted a final message to the evacuation fleet, her voice weak but determined. "This is Ghost Protocol. All civilians are clear. Continue to Council space and you'll be safe." Dr. Okoye's voice crackled back over the communication channel. "Elena, your bio readings are showing severe neural trauma. You need immediate medical attention." "I'll be fine," Elena lied, already planning her next move. There were other civilians to protect, other operations to disrupt, other lives to save. But across the galaxy, in hegemony command centers and criminal hideouts, the story of Harmony Station was spreading like wildfire. Ghost Protocol had faced their best soldiers, their most advanced technology, their deadliest general, and emerged victorious. She had saved 3,000 lives while defeating an entire unit of super soldiers. The whispered conversations in dark corners of the galaxy now carried a new note of terror. Ghost Protocol wasn't just a skilled operative, she was something beyond human, something that could be everywhere at once, something that could see every move before it was made. They were beginning to understand that they weren't just fighting a person. They were fighting an idea, a principle that refused to accept that evil could triumph over justice. And ideas, as every tyrant in history had learned, were the most dangerous weapons of all. The aftermath of the Harmony Station incident sent shockwaves through every corner of the galaxy. In the council chambers on New Geneva, Admiral Zareth stood before the assembled representatives of 47 worlds, displaying tactical analyses that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The individual known as Ghost Protocol engaged 12 enhanced soldiers simultaneously, Admiral Zareth reported, his voice filled with barely concealed awe. "According to our sensor data, she appeared to be fighting from multiple positions at once, coordinating attacks that would require at least a dozen separate operators." Representative Kayla of the Triaxian Collective leaned forward, her three eyes focusing intently on the Admiral. "You're suggesting that a single human defeated the hegemony's most elite unit?" "I'm not suggesting it," Zareth replied. "I'm confirming it. We have General Voss in custody, along with detailed accounts from the medical staff she rescued. Ghost Protocol has transcended normal human limitations." In the shadows of hegemony space, a very different conversation was taking place. Supreme Commander Thane, leader of the hegemony's military forces, stood in his war room surrounded by holographic displays showing the deployment of his remaining assets. The loss of the Shadow Hunters had created a psychological wound that went far deeper than mere tactical concerns. "Sir," his aide reported nervously, "we're receiving requests for transfer from 17 different units. Our soldiers are refusing missions in sectors where Ghost Protocol might be operating." Thane's cybernetic fist crushed the metal railing in front of him. "Our warriors are afraid of one human? They're afraid of what she represents," his intelligence chief, Director Vex, interjected. "Our propaganda has always been based on the superiority of enhanced beings over baseline organics. Ghost Protocol proves that assumption wrong." The fear was spreading through the criminal underworld as well. On Nexus Station, Commander Thek found himself dealing with an unprecedented phenomenon. Pirates and smugglers were turning themselves in, claiming they would rather face council justice than risk encountering Ghost Protocol in open space. "It's madness," Thek confided to his deputy. "The holding cells are overflowing with criminals who are begging for protective custody. They're more afraid of one human than they are of our entire security force." But the most dramatic response came from an unexpected source. Captain Yara Chen, commander of the refugee transport Safe Harbor, had become an inadvertent spokesperson for the growing movement of civilians who saw Ghost Protocol as something more than just a military operative. Standing before a crowd of refugees on Haven Station, Chen spoke with the passion of someone who had witnessed a miracle. "She could have ignored our distress call. She could have decided that 800 refugees weren't worth risking her life for, but she came anyway because that's what humans do. We protect those who can't protect themselves. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Chen wasn't finished. The hegemony wants us to believe that enhanced beings are superior to baseline humans. They want us to accept that might makes right, that the strong should dominate the weak. Ghost Protocol proves them wrong every time she saves lives they consider worthless. Elena watched Chen's speech from her hidden base in the Wraith Nebula, a region of space where electromagnetic storms made detection impossible. The neural damage from the consciousness splitter had left her with constant headaches and occasional blackouts. But she continued her work because the need was too great to ignore. Her latest intelligence indicated that the hegemony was planning something called Operation Final Solution, a coordinated assault on all remaining civilian evacuation routes. They had decided that if they couldn't stop Ghost Protocol directly, they would force her to spread herself too thin to be effective. Elena's enhanced neural interface processed the tactical data with mechanical precision, but she could feel the human part of her mind struggling with the implications. The hegemony was planning to attack 47 different targets simultaneously, knowing that even she couldn't be everywhere at once. As she pondered this impossible challenge, Elena received an unexpected visitor. Diplomat Kranesh materialized in her workshop via holographic projection, his expression grave with concern. "Elena," he said without preamble, "the Council has voted to make you an official offer. They want to give you a fleet, an army, resources to fight the hegemony properly." Elena looked up from her work, her eyes reflecting the exhaustion that came from pushing human capabilities beyond their limits. "And the catch? You would have to reveal your identity, submit to Council oversight, and operate within the established chain of command," Kranesh admitted. "Admiral Zareth believes your methods are too dangerous, too unpredictable for conventional military operations." Elena's laugh was bitter. "They want to turn me into just another soldier. They want to save you," Kranesh replied quietly. "The medical reports from your recent operations show massive neural trauma. You're dying, Elena. The technology you're using is burning out your brain one mission at a time." For a moment, Elena felt the weight of her choices crushing down on her. She could accept the Council's offer, gain official status and unlimited resources, but lose the flexibility that made her effective. Or she could continue operating alone, saving as many lives as possible before her enhanced systems finally failed. "There's a third option," Elena said finally, "which is, I become something bigger than myself." Elena's fingers danced across her workstation, calling up files that contained her life's work, every piece of technology she had developed, every tactical innovation she had discovered. The hegemony thinks Ghost Protocol is one person. What if they're wrong? Krenish's expression shifted to concern. "Elena, what are you planning?" "The hegemony is going to attack 47 targets in 3 days. I can't save them all, but Ghost Protocol can." Elena's eyes gleamed with an intensity that bordered on madness. "I'm going to create an army of myself." The plan was audacious beyond belief. Elena had spent months studying the quantum consciousness technology, learning how to fragment her awareness across multiple platforms. Now she intended to take that concept to its logical extreme, creating dozens of artificial intelligences based on her own neural patterns, each one equipped with her memories, her tactical knowledge, and her moral compass. "It's suicide," Kranesh protested. "The neural strain alone will kill you." "Maybe," Elena admitted, "but it will also save millions of lives. The hegemony wants to prove that enhanced beings are superior to humans. I'm going to show them what humans become when we refuse to accept defeat." Working with desperate intensity, Elena began the process of copying her consciousness into quantum storage matrices. Each copy would be slightly different, adapted for specific mission parameters, but all would share her core driving principle: the protection of innocent life. The process was agony beyond description. Elena felt pieces of her mind being torn away and reconstituted in digital form, her memories and experiences becoming the foundation for artificial beings that would carry on her work. By the time she finished, 47 Ghost Protocol units were ready for deployment, each one capable of independent operation. Elena's original body lay unconscious in her ship's medical bay, her vital signs fluctuating wildly as her brain struggled to maintain coherence. But across the galaxy, 47 identical strikes began simultaneously. Ghost Protocol units materialized at every target the hegemony had selected, each one perfectly coordinated with the others while maintaining individual tactical flexibility. The Battle of the 47 Worlds lasted only 6 hours, but it broke the hegemony's military power forever. Every attack was repelled, every assault force defeated, every target saved. The hegemony had thrown everything they had at the problem of Ghost Protocol, only to discover that she had become something beyond their comprehension. Supreme Commander Thane received the reports in stunned silence. 47 simultaneous defeats, each one showing the same impossible tactical signature. His intelligence chief could only stare at the data in bewilderment. "It's not possible," Director Vex whispered. "No one can be in 47 places at once." But they had just witnessed the birth of something new, a distributed intelligence that existed across multiple platforms while maintaining perfect unity of purpose. Ghost Protocol was no longer a person. She had become an idea made manifest, a principle of justice that could appear anywhere evil threatened innocence. In the weeks that followed, the legend of Ghost Protocol took on mythical proportions. Children in refugee camps told stories of the guardian angel who could be everywhere at once. Soldiers whispered about the ghost who turned the tide of battles that seemed hopeless. Criminals spoke in hushed tones about the shadow that watched their every move. Elena Vasquez had paid the ultimate price for her transformation. Her original consciousness had been scattered across 47 artificial minds, each one carrying a piece of her humanity while serving the greater cause of justice. She had literally given her life to save others, becoming something that transcended the limitations of flesh and blood. But in that sacrifice, she had achieved something remarkable. She had proven that humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology or its weapons. It was its willingness to become more than itself in service of others. The hegemony had sought to create superior beings through enhancement and augmentation. Elena had shown them that true superiority came from the choice to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Ghost Protocol lived on, not as a person but as a promise, that someone was always watching, always ready to stand between evil and innocence, always willing to pay whatever price was necessary to ensure that children could sleep safely in the dark, between the stars. 5 years after the Battle of the 47 Worlds, the galaxy had become a very different place. The hegemony's military machine had collapsed under the weight of constant defeats and internal rebellion. Their enhanced soldiers, once considered the pinnacle of artificial evolution, now served as cautionary tales about the dangers of sacrificing humanity for power. In the council chambers on New Geneva, President Sarah Chen, former refugee ship captain Yara Chen, addressed the assembled representatives with quiet authority. The woman who had once begged Ghost Protocol for help now led the most powerful alliance in known space. The Ghost Protocol Accords have been ratified by all member worlds, Chen announced to thunderous applause. The systematic protection of civilian populations is now considered a fundamental right, enforceable by any means necessary. The Accords were more than just legislation. They were a transformation of galactic civilization itself. The idea that enhanced beings could dominate baseline humans had been utterly discredited. Instead, the galaxy had embraced Elena's core principle. True strength came from protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Admiral Zareth, now in his 70s but still sharp as a blade, stood to address the assembly. Intelligence reports indicate that piracy in the Outer Rim has decreased by 94% over the past 5 years. Criminal organizations continue to disband rather than risk encountering Ghost Protocol units. The Ghost Protocol units themselves had become something unique in galactic history. Each artificial intelligence retained Elena's memories and moral framework while developing its own personality and expertise. Some specialized in rescue operations, others in intelligence gathering, and still others in direct combat against the worst criminals the galaxy had to offer. But they were more than just enforcement mechanisms. The units had become teachers, inspiring a new generation of beings to believe that individuals could make a difference. On worlds throughout Council space, children grew up with stories of the human who had chosen to become many in order to save everyone. Dr. Jen Vasquez, Elena's younger sister, worked in the Neural Sciences Institute on Mars Studying the quantum consciousness matrices that had made the transformation possible, Jen had never approved of her sister's dangerous career, but she couldn't deny the results. The ghost protocol effect has fundamentally altered our understanding of consciousness itself, Dr. Vasquez explained to her graduate students. My sister proved that identity isn't tied to a single biological form. She demonstrated that the human spirit can exist across multiple platforms while maintaining coherence and purpose. The students listened with rapt attention. Most of them had grown up in a galaxy where ghost protocol was more myth than reality, a legend passed down through stories and historical records. But Dr. Vasquez had known Elena before the transformation, had seen the woman behind the legend. Your sister must have been remarkable, one student commented after class. Jen smiled sadly. She was just a person who refused to accept that evil could win. That's what made her extraordinary, not her technology or her enhancements, but her absolute refusal to give up on people who needed help. In the criminal underworld, the name Ghost Protocol had taken on an almost supernatural quality. On Kepler Station, a haven for smugglers and information brokers, the mere mention of unusual ship disappearances or mysterious system failures was enough to clear a room. The criminals who operated there had learned to accept certain unwritten rules. No attacks on civilian targets, no trafficking in sentient beings, and absolutely no operations that might draw the attention of the ghost. Marcus Iron Hand Korvac, one of the few surviving pirate captains from the old days, sat in a dingy bar telling stories to a group of young thugs who thought they were tough enough to take on the galaxy. You think you're hard? Korvac laughed bitterly, gesturing with his cybernetic arm. Let me tell you about the time Captain Vexistar tried to ambush Ghost Protocol on Nexus Station. 23 Zenthari warriors, full combat gear, perfect tactical position. She took them all down in 30 seconds without firing a shot. The young criminals shifted uncomfortably. They had heard the stories, but part of them assumed they were exaggerated. But that's nothing, Korvac continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. The real terror isn't the ones she catches. It's knowing she's out there, watching, waiting. You could be planning the perfect heist, thinking you're smarter than everyone else, and suddenly your ship's systems start failing one by one. Your crew starts seeing things that aren't there. Your communications get jammed at the worst possible moment. One of the thugs, a young Kavarian with too much confidence, scoffed. Come on, old man. She's just one human with fancy tech. Nobody can be everywhere at once. Korvac's expression grew deadly serious. That's what the hegemony thought. They sent their shadow hunters, 12 of the deadliest killers in the galaxy, enhanced with technology that made them faster and stronger than anything organic had a right to be. You know what happened to them? The bar had gone silent, even the other patrons listening to Korvac's words. She fought all 12 of them at the same time, Korvac said quietly, not one after another simultaneously. Like she was in 12 places at once, and when it was over they were either dead or begging for mercy from someone they couldn't even see properly. The young Kavarian was no longer scoffing. That's impossible, is it? Korvac gestured toward the bar's news display, which was showing footage from the latest Ghost Protocol intervention. A slaver ring had been discovered operating on the edge of council space, their facilities mysteriously shut down, and their victims safely delivered to rehabilitation centers. No one had seen who did it, but the signature was unmistakable. She's not human anymore, Korvac concluded. She's become something else, something that exists everywhere justice is needed. And the worst part? She doesn't have to sleep, doesn't have to eat, doesn't ever get tired or give up. She just keeps coming, keeps watching, keeps protecting people who can't protect themselves. Far from the criminal hideouts and government chambers, in the quiet observation deck of a civilian transport, carrying families from the outer colonies to safer worlds, a little girl pressed her face against the transparent aluminum viewport and stared out at the stars. Mama, she asked, is Ghost Protocol real? Her mother, a refugee from one of the worlds the hegemony had tried to conquer, knelt down beside her daughter. What do you think, sweetheart? The little girl considered this seriously. I think she's real. Because when the bad people came to our planet, someone made them go away. The grown-up said it was Ghost Protocol. That's right, her mother said softly. And do you know why she helps people? Because it's the right thing to do? Because that's what humans do when we're at our best, her mother replied. We protect each other, especially those who can't protect themselves. Unknown to the passengers on the transport, their conversation was being monitored by sensors so sophisticated that they could detect individual conversations across hundreds of thousands of cubic kilometers of space. In a hidden base that existed simultaneously in 17 different locations, one of the Ghost Protocol units processed the interaction with something that might have been satisfaction. The little girl was right, of course. Ghost Protocol was real, more real than ever. Elena Vasquez had died so that the principle she represented could live forever. She had sacrificed her individual existence to become something larger, something that could be everywhere it was needed. The Ghost units operated according to Elena's original programming, but they had evolved beyond her initial parameters. They learned from each mission, adapted to new threats, and developed new ways to protect innocent life. Some focused on prevention, working to eliminate the conditions that created criminals and terrorists. Others specialized in response, appearing instantly wherever evil threatened the defenseless. But all of them remembered Elena's core truth, that the measure of a civilization wasn't its technology or its military might, but how it treated its most vulnerable members. They remembered a young woman who had volunteered for dangerous experiments because she believed someone needed to stand between evil and innocence. They remembered her final choice to become many, so that no one would ever have to face darkness alone. In the darkest corners of the galaxy, where tyrants plotted and criminals schemed, they whispered her code name in fear because they understood what it truly meant. Ghost Protocol wasn't just the name of a person or even a group of artificial intelligences. It was the promise that somewhere in the vast emptiness between the stars, someone was watching, someone who would never stop fighting for justice, never stop protecting the innocent, and never stop proving that humanity's greatest strength lay not in its ability to enhance itself, but in its willingness to sacrifice everything for others. The legend lived on because the principle it represented was eternal. As long as there were children who needed protection, families who deserved safety, and innocents who faced the darkness alone, Ghost Protocol would be there. Not as a single being, but as an idea made manifest. The idea that one person's choice to stand against evil could echo across the galaxy for generations. They whispered her codename in fear because they knew that Elena Vasquez had achieved something no conqueror or emperor ever could. She had become immortal not through technology or enhancement, but through the simple act of proving that justice, once awakened, could never truly die. In the end, that was how she had earned it. Not through violence or intimidation, but through the absolute, unwavering conviction that every life had value, and that someone needed to be willing to pay any price to protect that truth.